Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our latest webinar where we'll be discussing all things expansion. So everything from international expansion right the way through to new product development and new brand launch, all within Amazon. We've got an expert panel today balancing in-house agency and technology partners to help share their insights and knowledge, their failings and also learnings of going through this process multiple times. We've got, if I can just quickly kick off with some quick introductions. Emma, if I could come to you first.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm Emma Pickard. I'm head of seller services at Venture Forge. So I work with my exceptional team on all things seller and also hybrid into vendor.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Emma. Tom, could I come to you next?
Yes, hi guys. I'm Tom. I head up the Amazon team at Tetrasil. So we're in the automotive sector. We sell a lot of sort of household UK brands. So T-Cut, Car Plan. Basically, anytime you get anything for your car, you'll probably have used some of our stuff. So we've just transitioned from an agency to in-house. So we've got quite a fresh team internally at the moment.
Fantastic, thanks, Tom. And if you ever get a chance to visit Tom's office, I'd definitely recommend it. Chris, over to yourself.
Sure, great to be with you all. I'm Chris. I'm the co-founder of KhooCommerce. We work with Vendor Central users to help them do EDI integration, getting all those processes internally streamlined, often getting quite involved with the logistics and the fulfillment angle for companies. We don't do that ourselves, but we help to join all those pieces together because often they're the hidden operational processes that businesses have to consider in the context of today to do with expanding to different markets, but in the day-to-day to do with managing the orders and creating those shipments. So I really enjoy talking about carton labeling, boxing, shipments, chargebacks, EDI, and all the really geeky stuff. So it's really great to be with you all.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. Much appreciated. Before we kick off in today's session, we always start these sessions with a bit of a poll just to understand where you, the audience, are with this. So are you already on your journey? Is this purely learning and insights, or have you already done this already? So if I could ask my glamorous assistant Whitney to bob the poll up on the screen. If everyone could just take a couple of seconds just to have a read through and answer those questions based on where you stand currently. So just looking at those results coming in, we currently have just short of 40 people on the session. Just short of half the attendees are currently actively expanding into new markets. So it sounds like a lot of people are already on this journey. Moving down into consideration. So just about a quarter of the attendees are considering it. 15% are exploring it but haven't started it yet. And then the lowest sector of the audience. That's just moved, sorry. Jumping down to the bottom two sectors. So about 20% of the audience are focused on optimizing existing markets. And then about 15% haven't started to explore it yet. So it seems like we've got a good array of people that are in the process thinking about it. So I think what makes sense to start the session, if we start at a really, really high level, and Emma, if I could probably come to you first with this one. Mm-hmm. How do you know when the right time is to start looking at expansion opportunities, whether that be new market or new product?
I guess there's three main points to that. The first being, have you evaluated that current market? And whether there is that potential to expand with the current market you're in now, or whether to take that into extra territories. You would start by assessing how much room there is to grow within your current market, and then you could take a look at the international traffic that you've got coming through, determine whether there is that potential for that additional territory. Another one is to just leverage that performance data and the traffic trends. Are you looking into those extra territories? Is there the search volume for the product that you're looking to expand in? I guess that's a real key data-driven insight to look into. Is there the place for that product? And one of the real important things to look into is that operational capacity. Are you ready for that extra territory or for that expansion? If you're looking into international marketplaces or in international territories, do you have the infrastructure to manage the shipping? Are you ready with the translation tools? Do you have the customer service to be able to manage within that new region? and also the boring bits, but the tax and the legal and the landscape of that targeted country can be quite scary to start with. But once you get through that and you can find that real niche for your product, expansion into those extra territories could be really fruitful and perfect for your brand.
Definitely. Do you know what? I realise I've started with the most open-ended question I possibly.
All the answers.
So much. There's so much that you could do. But one of the main things that I speak to my clients about is piloting. So can you test a small amount of product? You don't have to go into it full throttle. Do a test run, see if it works for you, see if it works for your operational team. And just make sure that you've got that readiness there within the team itself. The opportunities are there. It's just making sure that you can real market them properly.
Definitely. There's something you said that was quite interesting then when you were talking about kind of the operational and kind of business focus almost.
Mm-hmm.
So I know the way that you work is you have different brands in different markets, and then you almost kind of look to leapfrog to an extent.
Yeah, so we look at it sort of the way we would look to expand into a new market would be, because we already operate internationally as a business, we'll look at what offline sales we've got in the market first and see if there's anything that's already moving, which is sort of helping us at the moment. For example, we're just launching in Saudi Arabia on Amazon, and we sell quite a lot there already. So there's some key lines that we know are going to do all right. But yeah, we have different brands that we can launch in different markets due to regulations and also due to labels on the actual packs themselves. So from our understanding from Amazon, we don't need to have local language on the labels unless it's a hazmat product or it's a safety issue. So we sell motorbike helmets and we don't have German on them, so we don't launch them in Germany, but we do have French, so they're quite a big thing for us in France. So yeah, we do have different brands that go across different markets. One thing that we're actually doing at the moment, which people might have already done, but it's merging our global accounts so the EU accounts, because you can list automatically, and that is saving us so much time, because we were literally uploading NISs to every single market with 1,000 products on. For context, we have 70,000 ASINs. So the catalog is absolutely massive. Yeah. So we can't launch everything in every market. One thing we do quite well is we start with a bigger advertising spend than we would obviously like to have in the long term, because we know it costs a lot more to actually expand in these markets. In terms of actually identifying the opportunity, because like you say, Josh, we can't launch 70,000 ASINs in 13 different marketplaces. It's just not going to work. So we use Prism, so Perpetua Prism, to actually identify the opportunities in the markets. I know you can use Cobalt as well, but I think it's a little bit more expensive. And then also we just speak to the vendor managers. So we had a call yesterday actually where they came with their own insights in the categories that they think we should be playing in, but we're not at the moment. So those are probably the three main ways: offline sales, tools, so software, and then actually just communicating with the vendor managers.
Sorry, Josh, to jump in. Josh, do you find, just related to that, Tom, sorry, do you ever look at competitors and how they're performing in that same marketplace as well? Because I was going to obviously say product market scoping exercise and so on, but something that people I've talked to before has said, they look at how their competitors are doing, ranking the volumes, because sometimes the product that you expect to do well isn't necessarily the same from one marketplace to the next. Do you ever look at that from when you're doing that analysis?
We definitely do. We have, for context, we have 7 different car care brands. So they're all very similar products, but they sit at different price points, different quality. So we know which brand sits against which competitor. And you're right, in some markets, it is not who you'd expect. Italy for us is all really local players. So it's quite hard to break into that market for us. Whereas if you look at the US, it's the massive global brands which are up there, and both of them require very different strategies, because it's going to cost you a lot more to take on a big global brand in the US than it is to take on a local brand in Italy.
Definitely. And how, I guess, Tom, kind of sticking with yourself on that, I know the way you use Amazon is part of a broader strategy. So when we've been obviously recently talking about kind of advertising, spending and investment, DSP or sponsored is only one piece of a puzzle. So how does that map out to the wider business?
So our policy as a business is Amazon first. So if we're expanding into a new market, we will always launch with Amazon first. A few reasons for that. One is you get amazing insight into how the products will actually do, because you'll get the local reviews. You'll obviously get the sales, so you know what's selling and what's not selling. And also, I feel like you might disagree with me here, Chris, but for us, it's a lot logistically easier for us to actually launch on Amazon, because we can go straight away with a customer pretty much straight away. So we're not having to pitch and have to tender for anything. We can literally just launch straight away, and all of our advertising spend is therefore the Amazon spend is the only advertising spend to grow those brands in the market. So yeah, we run DSP for awareness campaigns. We're exploring at the moment digital marketing on TikTok, Meta, YouTube, just to drive the traffic to Amazon, just to try and grow the brands there. Because you're right, Josh, we have probably a different policy as a business to a lot of others. The big global brands will already have the sales in the local regions, whereas we do it slightly opposite to that.
And do you know what? I think you can kind of almost say there it's a great test bed, and that's kind of how we talk to a lot of brands about it. The customer's already there, and Emma and Chris, going back to your point, I guess, around finding that latent demand, that's where Amazon can come into its own. And I completely take the point of it is easier because all you are doing is selling into latent demand. Whereas if you're trying to launch D2C or, find accounts out there, that is a longer, more strenuous process in some instances.
Yeah,
and we have retailers that will literally only really list us if we do well on Amazon. So we've been in meetings before with retailers, and you can see they've got Amazon up in front of them to see where it ranks, see how much it's selling. And that's one of the other reasons why we launch on Amazon first, because you don't want to be in a meeting with one of the retailers and there's no presence at all in that region. You're not even on Amazon. So yeah, that's probably the biggest reason, actually.
Yeah, you can use it as a good litmus test for the success of a product in a particular region. And just to your point earlier, I would agree that using Amazon as a spearhead into a new location is a very natural thing to do, just because you can leverage their fulfillment capability, you can leverage the marketplace. We know that a large majority of product customer searches start on Amazon. They don't necessarily start on Google, or you trying to launch your own D2C website or some other channel. It just makes sense to go straight in and leverage that existing network and opportunity. And then, I know we'll get onto this later, but then how you go about doing that in terms of what product selection, what fulfillment method, and how many products and which products, that's, I think, then when it takes a little bit more of a strategic approach, I'd say. But yeah, I'd agree with what you said.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess sticking with the international bit first before we start to talk on kind of existing territory and new product development. Emma, if I'm coming to you on this one, which markets, typically say you're a UK brand, which a lot of the audience will be on this session, which markets should you look at and how do you know which markets to go to next? Obviously not just from a market opportunity, but logistics, fulfillment, supply chain. How should you look to identify that?
You can get a rough idea from, I think, Chris, you mentioned it through competitor research. If you've got a similar product to one of your competitors selling within either EU or the States, you can get a rough idea of how that product's performing. I think logistically, if you look through your current sales order, is there some interest there from international markets? That's where then you can locate the potential. I think moving into the EU can be quite daunting to start, but utilizing FBA and how the FBA warehouses work within the EU to start is a real great test run. You can ship to one country and then get the FBA warehouses to do majority of the logistical side of things for you. So like you mentioned, Chris, if you're utilizing their operational methods, it's taking away a lot of the stress of launching through a retail website or something like that. So I think looking for the demand through your current ordering, doing that research into your competitors, also looking at the search volume within that particular territory can help you get more of an understanding. And then really utilizing the operational methods that Amazon offer.
Definitely, 100%. And I think kind of flipping the point you said, Tom, about the international piece and using Amazon as a test bed, I guess the other way you could look at it is if your brand is already live in a territory, you have warehouse stock is already there, there is latent demand.
Mm-hmm.
Almost an opportunity to then prioritize existing markets that you're already selling in as well.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, Chris, if I could come to you, a very similar question then. So sticking with the how do you choose which market, talking about the operational requirements. Now, it's not going to be a blanket response to this. I appreciate every product is different in different categories and different markets. If you're a typical UK-based business, are there certain EU territories to start with that would be easier than other territories to enter?
Yeah, I mean, I take a bit of a balanced approach, like you say. I think commercially, I'm always thinking about Germany as the biggest EU market, and then France, Italy, Spain as kind of the big EU 4 markets to aim at. Because of that, from a logistics and operational perspective, most people I speak to, when they think about a 3PL partner or their own warehouse, they think about Amsterdam, they think about Rotterdam, they're thinking about the Netherlands, they're thinking about Northwest Germany, those kind of areas, not exclusively. There are some people that have centers based out of Northern Italy or something like that. But those port areas are very natural places for both 3PLs and companies to kind of think about their logistics hub being based in. So that's like a locality perspective wise. The other side of that coin is Turkey. So sometimes people are increasingly moving their manufacturing distribution to the eastern end of Europe, just because then they can actually move the manufacturing out of the Far East, for example, and have it still within the Eurozone-ish, but then have it accessible by road freight within 2 days, for example. So a lot of companies, it might not be an option for everyone, but it's something to consider. Increasingly, we're seeing manufacturing and distribution located toward the east of Europe. So Turkey, even places like Poland, for example, can also be pop-up hubs, just because sometimes the costs are lower, but their freight delivery times are still comparable in terms of their speed. So that will involve a bit more of a local network partner. I feel like potentially coming from a company in the UK, the idea of working with someone in Rotterdam is a bit like, oh, okay, that's just over the channel, whereas Turkey feels like potentially a bit further away, and you've got to do a bit of cultural bridging to maybe build those relationships a bit more than you might do with someone in the Netherlands. But I think location-wise, that would be what I think about.
Yeah. Do you know, it does tend to be the key EU market that we do talk about secondary to the UK, does Germany, just because of the dominance. And then, as you say, when you start to look at Italy and Spain, if you look at the demographic and how those countries are set up, it's a little bit more kind of widespread almost. So to get any sort of real stakeholding in that market, it is quite difficult. So it does make sense. And I guess kind of the flip to that is some products are different. Some products will resonate really, really well in Spain. So, for example, we've seen it within sporting categories. So, for example, the football market resonates really, really well in Spain, given the prominence of the Spanish teams and things. So it's always worth, as we've kind of said quite a few times on the call so far, looking at that market insight. Where is the opportunity and where does your product resonate? I guess once you've kind of understood where you want to launch, then how do you then go about that? Emma,
open question, or Emma? Yeah.
So how do you go about launching into that extra territory? Logistically, you just need to be prepared, first of all. Have you got the amount of stock that you need to cover that country? Can you get that sent through to there? Have you got the correct documentation? So your tax registrations, all of the boring stuff, but that is really, really important to ensure that there's a smooth process. Amazon don't always make that easy with regards to the legislation and the paperwork. So be prepared for a few weeks of getting that sorted.
Generous with a few weeks there.
Yeah, very, very generous. Currently working with a lot of clients that are currently doing this. It's a very, very fun process to do. Once it's done, you're all right. And then the next bit would be, are your listings ready for that territory? Are they localized? You can't just be using a simple translation tool. You need to ensure that they are translating to that country and to that territory. We spoke to a client yesterday in a meeting who was branching out into Germany, and how they translated their product just didn't make sense as a localized language. So it's ensuring that you're really, really ready with that product and it's retail ready for that country. And like you said, Josh, ensuring that the product that you are shipping over culturally fits in, there is that demand for it, and that you're really monitoring the sales with regards to that and adding in some key KPIs. So ensuring that you're looking at the review velocity and also the ROI and whether it's actually profitable for you to keep shipping that in.
Definitely. And I think one thing we've probably all seen and heard quite a lot recently is expanding into additional markets on Amazon is just a click of a button.
Yeah.
Yes, but I think when you're absolutely right, start to talk about the operational laws, governance that sit around products, it starts to become so more technical.
Yeah.
I think you've probably fallen foul of this a couple of times, given that you sit probably in that DG category with quite a few of your products.
Yeah, we just for context, we would say 6 months is what we would plan for when we're launching in a new market. So it's probably slightly different with vendor. I know we do other marketplaces as well, so we'll do like Carrefour and Kaufland in Germany, and the KYC procedures on those are ridiculous, as I'm sure they are on some of the seller regions as well. But yeah, we do have a lot of issues with dangerous goods when we're launching in new markets. Because there's so many different regulations. For example, Brazil won't import liquids of any kind. So for us to do any direct imports to Brazil, we can't do it. So then we have to look at maybe getting a local 3PL there. Whereas Saudi Arabia, they'll literally direct import it with big enough POs that it makes sense for us. So yeah, it's in terms of how we would actually launch, translations is the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
We've had so many false starts with all of our regions. We probably had at least 3 false starts in the US. We've definitely had at least 2 or 3 in Germany and France. We've launched English products with the main image all in English in France, and I love the French, but they're not going to buy an English product if it's all in English on the front, whether it's screen wash or AdBlue or whatever. So we've had to translate all of the main images. So we've not actually changed the product, but we've translated all of the main images and changed the labels so they're a little bit more localized. But we would research so much now because we've made this mistake so many times. In the US, our best-selling product is a catalytic converter cleaner, and it's made for the English market. It has reduces or something on the front, like it increases your chances of passing an MOT, something like that. But in the US, they don't do MOTs. So there's just stuff like that we've failed so many times on. And then we're back to the drawing board. But yeah, that's why we put 6 months into these projects now, rather than just rush straight into them.
It's the small things that you don't think about. So those tiny changes within your first main image or your A+ can make a huge difference on conversion and how that product succeeds within that additional market. And like you said, it's really doing your research, seeing how that region does it, see what their purchasing behavior is, looking into the personas and everything can really help make that a successful launch within that market.
I think the other thing I'd add as well is just having a bit of it depends on your internal company culture, but having that mindset of taking a new bet on a marketplace and that it's going to cost money, it's going to cost time, it could all go wrong and it could be very expensive. And it's just not that you're expecting things to go badly, but I think if you just have this utopian idea that we just, like say, click a button, send some stock in, it's going to arrive, we're going to sell it out, and then we're just going to keep sending more stock, I think that you might be in for a bit of a step down in your expectations. Yeah. Whereas if you go in saying, probably going to cost us 50k, 100k, and it's going to take 6 months. We might have some aged stock payments. We might have some hold up at customs. We're probably going to get a big VAT issue. We're going to have some listing. Not that you're trying to be negative, but just internally, when you're discussing this amongst the teams, it really helps to have a realistic conversation to say, this is a great opportunity and we really want to step into it. And I think that we could grow our business by 10, 20% by leveraging an additional marketplace in the next, 18 months. But for the first 3 to 6 months, we're probably going to be in the red on this. And I think is that something we're willing to do? Treating it a bit like a bet is the way we talk about it sometimes on our side. We're taking a gamble on it. It's going to cost us this much money. Here's the, top 25 products we want to go with. Here's the top 100 products we're going to lead with. And here's our strategy for them. And then we'll see how it goes from there. But having that realistic conversation internally, along with all the practical stuff, I think is really important too.
Mm-hmm.
100%. And I think when you start to talk about the investment piece, which you've kind of started to merge onto a little bit there, Chris, the investment is as wide as it is broad. And that's everything from ads, stock, logistical, tax compliance, VAT, etc. It is a big investment in some cases. And you rightly say there, Tom, that sort of 6-month period to launch, and then potentially another 6 months worth of investment before you start to move back into the green as well. So it's a decision that should be taken lightly. And Chris, as you rightly say, you have to give it the time to breathe and produce before you kind of pull away from it, I guess. Yeah. Just before we kind of start to talk about the logistical things around kind of optimization, reviews, etc., Tom, you said something quite interestingly about the 1P, 3P and how that can change quite significantly about how easy and effective it is to launch in new markets. What have you seen from difference? Because I know you operate a hybrid model.
We do operate a hybrid model, although I would say I know a lot more about the 1P side than the 3P side. We're in 13 markets. We've got a hybrid model in the UK, and the only other seller account we have is in Japan. So we're very 1P based. The difference is just that KYC really for us, and they need so many documents to be able to pass them. We're a relatively simple business as well because we're all owned by one person, and it still takes us 2 or 3 months to pass the KYC procedures. Obviously, there's the actual logistical differences, and I think it's just a market by market sort of analysis as to which one is better for you in those markets. Normally for us, it's the 1P side because we can get that first, whether it's a direct import or whether it's that first order, and it's a lot easier to sell it to the business when you've sold 100 grand worth of stock than it is to say, right, let's just get a warehouse set up, or you'll ship it here. We don't know if it's going to sell, but we're going to pay to store it or whatever. So it's a lot easier for us internally to do it on the 1P side.
Yeah. Chris, is that something you'd agree with, that 1P is slightly easier from an expansion perspective?
Yes and no. I think like sometimes, I mean, obviously I'm biased towards 1P. Like the majority of what we do is all 1P. We do hybrid as well, like in terms of helping our customers. But yeah, I lean toward that side. I think the challenge I see a lot, and I see it on forums as well, is where people have a vendor account in one territory and they say, "Oh, I want to just get a vendor account in America or wherever it is," and it's kind of like the $1 million or maybe the $10 million question. You know, how do you just get a new account over there? And bluntly speaking, sometimes you don't have that option available to you. You'll have to start with an FBA route and then either get invoiced on, or join forces with someone else or a reseller that uses their account or something else like that. So that might be your common approach. Pan-EU vendor accounts are quite common nowadays. I think Amazon's pushing for that, mainly because then they can centralize the management rather than having country-specific management. They can just manage all your European presence from one base, which obviously is a separate topic that people have opinions about. But I can see from Amazon's perspective why they're trying to do it. But yeah, I think leveraging the 1P network is good. If you don't have a presence in there, I would still encourage someone to go FBA and to try using that as their entry point. One thing I was going to add on this particular topic is that I think that it slightly depends potentially on your product category, if you want to go straight into an FBA warehouse as a shipment, or if you'd want to go through a 3PL warehouse first. Basically, like if you've got a huge heavy product, you might consider just putting in a 3PL warehouse first, and then just them doing the final leg into either into FBA or doing FBM fulfillment from the 3PL directly. Depends on your product category. Whereas for a small light product, FBA's the fees are not going to be too prohibitive for you expanding into that new place. But yeah, I think obviously I love 1P and I think it's great. But yeah, I think there's sometimes you don't have a choice about that. You have to go 3P FBA.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think that comes back to that investment piece as well, as you rightly say there. Is it 3PL? Is it direct? There's so many different options and ways that you've got to make it stack up for the business as much as anything. So I guess so far we've kind of talked about how you find the opportunity, what you need to consider as part of that opportunity. I guess the next natural part of the conversation is starting to talk about how do you launch that product in the market now. So this is going to be a very broad conversation. There's so many different touch points from an optimization, rankings perspective, but there's so many nuances that we've seen when launching into new markets. even when you're talking about, for example, a product that may carry a couple of thousand reviews in the UK, translating that through to Germany, or merging those into Germany, should I say, doesn't necessarily have the same resonance. So Tom, Emma, I guess from your perspective, have you seen any pitfalls of things like that?
I'll let you start, Tom.
Yeah, so for us to start, we've done exactly what you just said there. We've launched, when we very first did it, we've launched new ASINs instead of just merging with the same one in the UK, and then it's a real nightmare to merge the ASINs and merge all the reviews at that point. So we've done that before in France. So we've made that mistake. The biggest thing for us is we use a software called Analytics, which is, we wouldn't really be able to function internationally without it, because the catalog is so broad. It stays on top of all of our content. So we have 3 what we call category managers, which basically look after the catalog, and they have their own brands, and they will get alerts whenever the buy box goes missing for those brands, or whether even down to like days of stock cover, we'll get alerts set up for those so that we can flag it. That's probably the biggest thing for us that we found is, I know this is sort of not, it's going back to sort of the logistics side, but I would always recommend sending too much stock, whether it's to FBA or a 3PL or into vendor, because the false starts really from us are when we go in, we spend thousands on advertising, we do really well, and then we go out of stock and it takes 2 weeks to get it back in stock, and then you fall right back down the rankings. So that's why we have 15-day stock cover. So we have alerts set up for that. So we then flag it with the vendor managers to say, look, what can we do here? Whether it's a forecast override or a manual buy or whatever. But software for us is the biggest thing. We use that, and then obviously we've got so we use Perpetua Prism, but we use Perpetua as well for the advertising side. So that helps us massively, because again, the catalog's so big to actually optimize. There's no way that one person could sit there and optimize 33 different brands in 13 different marketplaces. You just can't do it. So software is probably the biggest thing for us. I appreciate some of the softwares are quite expensive, but there are other ones out there which are quite cheap and do a good job as well.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, even from a seller perspective as well. The stock outs are a nightmare in the UK, never mind distributing outside of the UK. So being very aware of your stock limitations and ensuring that you have stock coverage, and especially because you don't have all that much confidence that the product will work. So if it does work and you don't have enough, then like you said, you drop down organically. So definitely utilize the software from both the seller and vendor perspective and ensure that you're operationally, with regards to stock, all set and ready.
Yeah, definitely. And do you see different tech platforms, Tom, just sticking with your point around tech, that you use in different marketplaces, or do you use one tech stack that you can use across each?
We have one tech stack that we can use across everything. We've explored loads of different softwares, to be honest. So I know that Profitero is quite a good one. We don't use it, but it's quite a good one to track your market share. We've discussed with Catapult, which is a similar thing to Analytics. So it tracks pretty much everything, but it's more on the vendor side, whereas Analytics can cope with the hybrid model that we've got. And then with ads, there's loads of different options you can go for. We've had meetings with Sky, but we just chose Perpetua as the best option for what we needed. In terms of like the actual sort of per market, there is another software which is more of a market research tool called Viper, which we're discussing with at the moment, which they get sort of real-time customer feedback on anything you want. So if you ever see those like ads come up on your Facebook saying like you can do this survey and you'll get paid X amount, that's basically what Viper do. So you can get information within a couple of hours on anything you want, which goes back to the original point of how do you identify the market. You can so we did one this week for T-Cut. So is T-Cut known in Canada and Australia? And it came back that 20% of people in those markets do know about the brand, which was surprising to us, and then that gives us a bit more confidence to launch the brand in those regions.
Yeah. Do you know what, that's quite interesting when you start to talk about data, because obviously a lot of what we've spoken about so far, is Amazon, but data platforms like that are obviously going to be quite imperative to that decision as well, because obviously the Amazon market is only going to be so big, and as you rightly say, it's a test bed to a wider expansion as well, so data like that is going to be quite important. Okay, perfect. Sticking with the optimization theme then, so we haven't spoken a lot about paid advertising side of it, but obviously that's a really key part of any launch. Emma, again, maybe if I come to yourself on this one, from a paid ads perspective, how do you see that playing out?
Another open-ended one, but with budget, and I guess like you said, Chris, you have to have that investment piece in there. So you have to be willing to spend in order to gain the traction within that marketplace. We see it a lot where there's limited budget with a new product launch within a different territory, and there is that false start and there isn't that traction that you need. So organically, you need to be very prepared. So with your A+, your listing quality and your translation, but also providing budget and an increase in budget to then target that particular market can really help you sort of boost your sales and also compete. If you have noticed a competitor doing really well in that international market, ensuring that you've got competitor targeting there, utilizing how well they're doing to then boost your brand's performance is key.
Yeah, definitely.
If I can, I lost my camera then for a minute. Something you said earlier, Tom, is that you do you do like a lot of investment on stock and inventory as well as advertising spend. Does that mean that basically you're just going in heavy as soon as you can? Is that what I'm hearing from you correctly? You're just saying we go big inventory and we go big spend. Do you just only do it on a few ASINs? Like, how do you then go around that, or do you just throw money at the wall?
we don't throw money at the wall, but we do go heavy. It depends on the size of the market, what the size of the prize really for us. We go big in the US because we know that if we crack it, the market is like
worth it,
just massive for us. We're probably going slightly away from what we've done previously for sort of the next financial year, which is for our commoditized products. We will really focus on sponsored ads and things that we know if you're buying a screen wash, it's more based on price. You'll buy whatever the cheapest is, or if one's goes down to a different freezing point, that sort of thing. So it's quite commoditized. You can get the sale through sponsored ads. Whereas if it's a brand, so we've got a brand called Car Gods, which is our premium detailing range, to convince someone in the US to pay $30 for an interior detailer when you've got Armour All who are selling it at $7 is all about the brand. And that's where we're going away from sponsored ads. Am I still in here? I've just got a thing saying my internet connection's bad. Okay, cool.
I vanished. Sorry.
So we've gone more towards that TikTok, Meta, influencers, YouTube, awareness. Just pure awareness, which again is difficult to sell internally because you're spending money and you're not immediately getting that return. But in the long term, it makes such a big difference.
I don't know if it's off piece, Josh, so forgive me if this is, but Tom, do you use AMC as part of that quantification of, using DSP and trying to attribute some of that, or is that not something that you've got involved with yet?
We do, although I'll be honest, I'm not heavily in the ads. We've got an advertising manager who is amazing. So she just owns all of the marketplace, and we've got another guy in the team who supports on that as well. So yeah, in terms of investment, we've invested very heavily in an internal team. So we've got 12 people internally just focused on Amazon. We've got the investment on advertising is big, but obviously with that, the pressure of getting the sales is also there. So
yeah, definitely. Perfect. Well, look, I'm conscious we're coming towards the last sort of 20 minutes of the session now. So for everyone that's in the audience, we do have a questions box just on the right-hand side. So if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask the panel, we'll be looking to come to those in the next sort of 5 to 10 minutes time. Tom, just sticking, or everybody, sorry, not just Tom, sticking with the paid advertising side of it. When you first launch into a market, do you typically see, well, obviously you're typically going to see a heavy investment from a TACOS, ACOS perspective. What would you expect that split to be between paid advertising sales and organic sales in the early days? And at what point would you start to see that flip back to kind of a BAU model almost?
So for us, being completely honest, when we launch, I mean, you're looking at like 95% of your sales will be from the ads. We generally aim for a a target total ACOS at the start of the year. That's more just made up of the fact that this is how much you've got to spend and this is the sales you've got to hit. So it's sort of, you can naturally see it. So we will try and bring it down over a few years. So our total ACOS, without giving loads of information out, but our total ACOS in the UK is probably between 1 and 5%. In the US, it's between 20 and 30%. So it's the investment's a lot heavier. And then in the EU, it's probably somewhere in between that. And that goes on how sort of experienced we are in the markets, how developed we are in those markets. So we would try and bring it down over a 2-3 year period.
Yeah. Something quite interesting you said then, Tom, which we haven't actually touched on yet, but you were talking about US and where you invest heavier in US. Yes, some of the markets will be a lot bigger opportunity, but actually the competitive nature of those markets makes it less enterable for a newcomer.
Yeah, we've seen cost per clicks of $50 for some of our keywords, like just absolutely mental. Some of the keywords we bid on now, so car wax would be $6, which even for that is just really expensive for what we're actually trying to do there. And then it doesn't leave you with much margin at the end if you do end up converting on those. So yeah, the investment for us is so much bigger up front. And I think what you were saying earlier, Chris, about you would always sort of tell people that Germany's the way to go in Europe. We've done it the opposite way. So automotive in Germany, I think it's the second biggest market on Amazon. It's so hard for us to go in and compete. There's they really the local market there is all local brands. They love the local brands. So we've got Sonax and Liqui Moly who just dominate the whole market. In France and Spain and Italy, although they do have the local players, it's so much easier for us to go in and try and be in the sort of top 2-3 brands. Whereas, yeah, Germany is so difficult for us. This year is probably the year where we're going to go a little bit heavier in Germany and see whether we can start to tackle it, but only off the back of the success in the other markets. Yeah.
Again, that goes into making sure that your category or your sector is something that's suitable for that territory. So like Chris, you said Germany is incredible for certain sectors and categories, and Tom, you're saying that for the automotive it's not. You really have to do your research into that to make sure that there is actually the want and need for that. And if that culture prefer to shop local or prefer to shop within their region, there's a lot to take into consideration for that.
I think also on that, and I'm by no means an advertising expert, so I don't want to get too out of my depth too quickly, but I think different marketplaces value different parts of a product differently.
Definitely.
You know, and you said this earlier, like with the MOT example, Tom, but just following on, like maybe the German market is much more technical, much more about the features, much more about the percentage improvement or some other data-driven aspect. Some of the markets might care more about the aesthetic, or they might care more about how, you know, the lifestyle branding imagery, or does this, you know, do something else, and that's the awareness piece of the brand. But it might be exactly the same product, but it's just in terms of how you market it and how you put it out there and what you're targeting on. It isn't, I mean, yeah, even across America, I think it'll be different regional differences. You know, in the north, it's about the cold products, and in the south, maybe it's about cleaning off, you know, dust from a hurricane or something else, you know, that's come through. I'm going to get out of my depth with your products, Tom. But but I mean, it's you need to be thinking about those regional differences when it comes to the ad approach.
Definitely, yeah.
100%.
Yeah, we've also done stuff. So in the digital marketing piece we're doing, we've uncovered a lot from working with an agency who's helping on that. But for example, in Montana, the average cars per person is 1.8, wow, which is mad. So we're going to go a little bit heavier in particular regions for whatever reason that is, whether it's Montana because they have more cars, or whether it's California because the price point is higher and they like more luxury things, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it really depends on the region, and somewhere like the US, you can't cover the whole region straight away anyway.
Yep.
No, it is one country, but it's obviously 50 states. So
100%. Perfect. Well, look, I'm conscious of moving into the last 15 minutes now, so I think it makes sense to start answering some questions coming through from the audience. So if I could kick off with a question from Stephanie first. So what are some signs that now is the right time to expand into a new territory? Emma, could I come to you on that one first, maybe?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that in one of the points before is, are you seeing that demand within your current market? Are you seeing additional territories placing orders, and also looking at your competitors? Is there somebody in the EU that's doing a similar product and doing it really well? That may be your sign to start tapping into that market. The best way to do that is to do the pilot method that I mentioned before, testing and just seeing if operationally that's something that you can keep up with and also expand into.
Definitely. Tom, Chris, anything you'd like to add to that one?
I think if you're asking the question, then clearly you're thinking about it. Just, on the back of what we said earlier, I think you've got to have the budget to consider it.
Yeah.
I think you've got to have the product market fit and the scoping exercise planned out. I think you've got to be intentional about it, and you've got to be accepting that it's going to take some time to invest in. I wouldn't be too upfront pigeonholed on we are going to go into Germany as your outset, because it might be that actually you do your scoping exercise and, like, for example, you were saying, Tom, actually you think France is going to be our first touch point, which is, maybe the market cap is lower, but our chance of penetration and our market share we're going to hit will be higher, and our options are going to be better. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think that I just wouldn't be closed-minded about it. It might even be not Europe at all. You might say, actually, we've done a whole exercise and we should go to America, or vice versa. So I think that's what I'd add to that.
Definitely.
I think that the other lens to look at it is, what are you trying to achieve from the new market launch? If this is about pure pounds and pence, have you maxed out your current market?
Yeah.
Or again, is this about, Tom, you kind of said, using that test bed to get into a new market?
Yeah, I think as well for us, it depends where you are at the moment. So T-Cut, we're not completely maxed out on what we can do in the UK, but we're not going to double the sales for T-Cut because people search for it, people want it. So then we have to look elsewhere. And that's one of the reasons we started to expand in the first place.
So I think in summary to that, there's a lot of things to consider. It depends on what the business is trying to achieve, and I think that should drive out a series of actions as to kind of what's next, I guess.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for that one, Stephanie. If I move on to one from Paul now. So thoughts on UK versus EU spend? Any markets you see more efficient spending than others?
I don't have the insight to hand for that one. Tom, you touched on that. It's so dependent on the category and the sector that you're going into. If you're looking for efficiency and you are looking into the EU, for example, or the US, it's solely based on what you're actually looking to sell within that territory, and the efficiency of that spend. Like we said, there is an investment piece within this. So your spend for the EU or for the US will be a lot higher than the UK, and your return will not be as fruitful as the UK may be to start, but it's that investment piece.
Yeah, I think for us, we spend a lot more in the UK than we do in the EU, but the return we get is a lot more obviously in the UK than in the EU. So it just as sort of a caveat to that, if we're discussing with a new region, so Brazil or Saudi Arabia or whatever it is, if we're discussing with the vendor manager, to sort of increase the initial order, we will commit to 20% of whatever the order is as advertising spend. So that's sort of where we start, and then we'll try and bring the spend down as a total of the overall sales as we get more developed in the region. For this year, we'll spend probably between 15 and 20% in the EU of the overall sales.
Yeah.
Definitely, 100%. Perfect. Thank you very much for that one, guys. Moving back to another question from Stephanie now then. So, Emma, probably one for you, this one. Do you recommend launching with full A+ content and brand store immediately, or phasing it in after traction builds?
I would always suggest that you go in with your content complete and that you're retail ready for that region. Like we've said, the different regions have different approaches to their purchasing behavior. So if you can target that visually with your A+ content and your brand store immediately, you then have got more of a chance of selling that product. Whether it's someone like you mentioned, Chris, if they're visually purchasing that product because of how it aesthetically looks, you're targeting them with your A+ and your brand store, you're getting that story across. If it's somebody that's looking for something that's just efficient, quick purchase, Your copy needs to be up to date. Your titles need to be perfectly translated to that region. I think going in this staged approach, you may miss that potential customer. I would always go in with everything retail ready, so you're covering all potential market.
We always say we want to do exactly what you said there, Emma, but often when there's so much stuff going on, we end up just copying the brand store. So literally raising the case, copying the brand store, and then doing the same for all the A+s, and then we'll go in and optimize them after, because we'd rather sort of have one and it not be perfect than it not have one at all.
I guess
we would always go back and fix it. It's all on resource.
Resource and investment, time as well as money. If you've got that time to invest to make that listing retail ready, then do so. But if you want to test the market quickly and to see what that purchasing behavior may be, then you can certainly quickly throw it in and then edit along the way. But for my recommendation, I would always want to see that be fully ready for that market.
Tom, what kind of timescale are you working on when you say you just start and then fix it later? Are you talking weeks? Are you talking years? What's your...
No, we're talking weeks. I mean, what we'll do for anyone that doesn't know, because I only found this out probably a year ago, but for your brand store, if you go onto where your brand store is, if you take the entity ID, which will be in the top, the actual URL at the top, if you raise a case in the region that you want to put it in and give them the entity ID, they'll copy it over for you. So we're probably looking at weeks. When it wouldn't be a year after, but often we'll launch a new product in the region, and to copy everything over, it can take a long time. So we're looking at weeks to do that.
100%. And I think one of the things that is commonly missed with Amazon is, as much as there is a lot of latent demand, we kind of talked about the competitive nature of it. If you are investing all this time, effort and money in some instances, you want to make sure you're giving it a fair chance of competing as well. So going back to the analogy you used, Emma, of retail ready, it is your digital shelf. Would you put that product on a retail shelf? Probably not in some instances if you've not got infographics, A+, SEO compliant to where it needs to be. So making sure you absolutely have those foundational elements, and even down to review counts. Tom, you kind of talked about merging listings and things. Yeah. All of that has to be absolutely ready before you even considering spending on advertising in those markets, because as we rightly know, you'll just burn cash very, very quickly. So yes, absolutely making sure everything from a foundational element is in place is really, really imperative. Absolutely. Yeah. Perfect. Moving on to one of the questions that has been emailed in now. So Whitney has shared this one with us. How do you decide between using FBA, 3PL or hybrid models when expanding internationally? Chris, I'd imagine this one sits quite close to you.
Yeah, we kind of touched on this one earlier. Slightly depends on your product type, in my opinion, and which region you're going into. I would if you've got vendor, then obviously you can ship directly into that. There are some logistical things you need to think about in terms of transferring between one entity to another. First, potentially, you're technically selling from a French entity or German entity into Amazon, or if you're just going directly from your company in the UK. But I think I would lean toward starting with FBA. If you've got a big, bulky product, you might want to consider using a 3PL as an intermediary, just partly for the lead time and also for the FBA storage costs associated with that, because then you can minimize some of the overhead. If you do go in hard and you put, 60 days worth or 30 days worth of stock in, and it's quite a large product, you could be looking at a false start, a lot of pain, and then you've got FBA fees coming out of your ears. On the flip side, finding the right 3PL partner and having all those negotiations and moving the stock to them, and then them taking care of it for you, that is also an emotional process. Emotional is the wrong word. A draining process. It's emotionally costly, is what I mean, to go and negotiate all of that. That's if you are looking for 3PL partners across Europe specifically, or in America, obviously we know people that I'd be happy to connect you to if that's helpful. Just send me an email about it. They often have their own specialism, like we deal well with this product or we deal well with that type of product. I would lean towards saying put it straight into an FBA warehouse or straight into a vendor warehouse. You can, I think Tom touched on it as well, you can do the direct import models as well. So sometimes a vendor will just say, we will take a container straight in and then just do it that way. And you can take that approach instead. And then that way it's separate business case and conversation. But then you've got a conversation with them saying, we will commit to this amount of stock, we're going to do this amount of advertising, this is the amount of sell-through we want to see, and you've got some understanding around what to do. But yeah, I think over time, as the relationship progresses, I probably would suggest moving towards a 3PL relationship, or you can set up your own warehouse in that territory too. Because you'll want to think more broadly about, we source our products from where we source them from. You shouldn't really be taking them into the UK and then back into Europe and then back into an FBA center in Europe. That's not an efficient way of doing it long term. You probably want to just be going either straight from your sourcing into FBA or straight from your sourcing into your 3PL in Europe, because then otherwise you're just fiddling around with inventory a lot of the time. In the first case, it's fine if you're shipping it from the UK into your FBA center in Europe, having already imported it once into the UK. That's fine. That's just life. But I would look, once you've established this up, I'd want to, see that transition away into a bit more of a stable arrangement.
Perfect. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Chris. I think we'll take one more question then, which is a bit of a hot potato in the industry as we are now. So Amazon Ireland, obviously this is very, very recently launched. It's been in the planning stages for a long time. Tom, have you expanded to Ireland yet?
We have had the conversations. We had sort of a difficulty because we've got a distributor there, and it was who was going to fulfill the orders and things, but we've got over that. The advice we'd give is, and this actually came from Martin Hubel, to be fair, so I'm not going to pass this off as my own advice. He said go in with lower terms, and they seem to be a lot more open to go in with lower terms for vendor than we've seen actually in Europe for a long time. So yeah, that's probably the biggest piece of advice, because obviously the lower you go in at, the harder it is for them to get it up. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one. Other than that, I mean, we're quite lucky because our brands are quite well known there already, and I think a lot of UK businesses will find that. So I think it's probably the best expansion market for UK businesses, much better than Netherlands and Belgium and Sweden and things.
Yeah. Do you know what? You kind of stole my thunder a little bit there, Tom. I was going to say, UK-based business, it's pretty much a no-brainer. I think that's a bit of a little gem around the term side of it as well, Tom. Actually, that's really interesting. From a seller perspective, Emma, anything different?
Not really. Again, I really agree with the fact that it's a great market to tap into. From the paperwork side of things, the legislation, it's a little bit easier than expanding fully into the EU, and they are excited about the launch. So the commentary and the discussions that Amazon are having with regards to us and our clients is very proactive in the approach. We work with a brand that's extremely well known within Ireland, and they were one of the first that we launched there. So I'm really looking forward to our catch up with that lady next week, just to see how that's working for her. But I think it's a really, really exciting opportunity for UK brands.
Perfect. Last couple of minutes, Chris, shall I just come to you on that one as well? Have you seen anything different from fulfilment perspective to the Irish market?
Yeah, I'd just echo what Tom said. At this stage, I think they're quite keen to get specific brands into Ireland. Not every vendor we work with has been approached about it. The ones we've seen approached have been the much more household names, the consumer electronics brands and stuff like that. And I think that does put you in a strong negotiating position when you're just having those conversations with them. Ireland is a bit of a thorny. I mean, we had this with Brexit, with the, is there going to be an Irish Sea tax border and all this kind of thing. Ireland's actually quite complicated logistically. What we see a lot of people do is either they fulfill from the UK and then they have some arrangement with an importer and try and figure it out that way. I was actually thinking about Ireland when I answered your question earlier about where to put a fulfillment center, Netherlands, Turkey, and actually a surprising one that people also do is Ireland, because it is kind of Europe, but it's also kind of not Europe. It's a bit of a strange, the southern half of Ireland, obviously, but it's sometimes a place where people will also look to set up a 3PL as well. Not so much, but it's an emerging case there as well. But I think you do need to be mindful of that from a fulfillment perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Chris. Well, look, that brings us towards the end of today's session. So firstly, a big thank you to you guys on the call, Tom, Chris, Emma. Thank you very much for sharing your insights, and to everybody that's attended the session. We'll reach out to everybody and we can share contact details if anybody wants to pick up specifically with Chris around some of the bits that he's mentioned, or Emma and Tom. We're more than happy to share those at the right time. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, everybody, and I'm sure we'll speak throughout the course of the week. Yeah. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Bye.